All right, guys, we continue with the second last talk for today with Thomas and Werner. They're going to talk about how to make your frontend accessible. Enjoy it.
So as you can see, we're going to talk about the latest development in wearable microphone technology. After this talk, you should be able to avoid some major issues regarding disabled users. You should be able to test for basic accessibility by using a screen reader, and you will know where to find relevant information regarding technical solutions. That's what we are going to cover today. We'll briefly talk about why you should care about accessibility. Then most of the time will be spent with screen reader demonstrations. We will show you how to use the Wcag guidelines. And if we have enough time, briefly talk about keyboard accessibility. Now, first few words about us. So Werner, who are you?
Yes. My name is Werner H. I am your screen reader guy today. I'm 50 years old. I am visually impaired since birth. After high school, I studied computer science at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. And during the last 22 years, I worked for different companies as a software developers, mostly in Bern and Zurich. Now I'm working for Ad Novum Informatik AG as a software developer. At Ad Novum, I am also a member of the internal usability and interaction design group, where my focus is on accessibility, especially accessibility testing. I also help out project teams regarding accessibility issues. My hobbies are reading, mostly scientific stuff. I began a physics study some years ago. And besides my daily job, I love traveling through Scotland. That's where the picture with the deer was taken.
Okay, my name is Thomas Jacki. I work as a front-end engineer at the Unic in Altstetten. I'm living in the most beautiful city in Switzerland, in St. Gallen. And I'm currently helping out a farmer in the Swiss mountains as part of my civil service. So yeah, it all boils down to we both like feeding animals. Just a few bullets about our awesome employers. The most important ones, 2 links. We are both looking for co-workers. So in case you're a front-end engineer or a designer, information architect, software engineer, just come work with us. Why should we care about accessibility? This quote by Tim Berners-Lee sums it up quite nicely. The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. If a quote by the Godfather himself is not enough for you, have a look at this number. That's the fraction of people in Switzerland with some kind of disability. So a lot of them are connected to age, but anyway, it's an impressive number. And if we assume that even a small part of those disabilities somehow reduces the ability to browse the web, then it's obvious that accessibility is a really important factor in every web project. One of the most important parts of web accessibility is access for visually impaired users. So, Werner, how do you browse the web?
Okay, I work with Mac OS X usually, and Mac OS X has a screen reader right built into it. It's called VoiceOver.
Accessible, front-end conference Zurich window. How to make your
And-
front-end accessible, front-end conference Zurich HTML content has keyboard focus.
Okay. You can enable VoiceOver in the system preferences under accessibility. And when you have enabled it, you can just disable or enable it again by pressing Command F5. So how does a blind user navigate the web? VoiceOver has some VoiceOver keys, that's Control plus Option, and you press a VoiceOver key plus one of the cursor keys. For example, a VoiceOver key plus arrow right.
How to make your front toolbar. How to make your leaving banner entering main.
Okay.
Conference schedule for Thursday.
And this is our first demo. It's an inaccessible table. And I can move through this table by simply moving to the right.
Time. Design track. Tech track. 08 30
we don't
10
see the
00.
focus. I'm gonna try.
Okay.
VoiceOver off. VoiceOver on Chrome. How to make your front-end accessible. Front-end conference Zurich window. How to make your front-end accessible. Front-end conference Zurich
Yep.
HTML
let's
content
try
has
again.
keyboard
Okay.
focus. How to make entering. Leaving banner enter. Time.
Do you see it?
No. Yeah, but we will see it on iOS.
The problem with this table is I can only navigate in horizontal direction. I'm not able to navigate in the vertical direction. So this table is really simple, but if you have large tables, it's quite difficult to get an idea of the layout of the table. So this table is really not how you should code a table. So let's go to the next example.
Visited link. Forward to Demo 1.2. How to make your front-end accessible. Front-end conference Zurich entering leaving banner entering main. Conference schedule. Time. Column 1.
So VoiceOver announces time column 1.
Design track.
And now I can, for example, move down.
Row 2 spans 2 columns. Check-in. Coffee and welcome. Row 3. The creativity or evolution. Row 4. Be friends with your designers and style guides. Coping with the broken web. Row 5 time. 12. 00. 13. 00. Column 1.
So you clearly can hear it's much more accessible than the previous example. So that's the way you should code a table. Perhaps some remarks
Keynote.
about
Keynote.
screen
VoiceOver
readers.
off.
There are, of course, different screen readers for different platforms. Some of you might already be familiar with JAWS, for example. I would just recommend that, for example, if you don't want to pay a lot of money for screen reader license, there is NVDA for Windows, which is an open source screen reader. Or there's also Orca for Linux. So it's certainly a good idea to do accessibility tests with different screen readers.
Okay, so let's have a look at the code of those examples. Now, if we go back to the inaccessible one, you can see that the table heads are not marked up using table heads or header cells, but instead by using the strong tag. So visually, there is no difference, looks perfectly fine. However, it's not possible for a browser or a screen reader to determine whether those cells are meant to be header cells or content cells. Another thing is the caption for the table is just marked up using a paragraph tag. So again, there's no possibility to determine whether this is connected to the table or this is just unrelated text. Now having a look at the accessible example, it's using the caption tag, and even more important, it's using this header cells to mark up the header cells, which might be obvious to most of you. However, it's still a real issue in the real world. And we will see later on that in case you omit those tags, those header cells, VoiceOver is not able to determine then that it's a table at all. So I guess that's from times when tables were used for layout purposes. So VoiceOver had to decide whether a table was a real table or not. And one decision is based on whether there are header cells. You can see here that we have an additional attribute for those, the scope attribute. Now, in case you have a table with two directions, it makes sense to tell the browser and the screen reader if it's applied to a column or a row. So, to sum this up, it's pretty obvious. Use the correct markup to mark up tables. It might not always be our fault as front-end engineers. I guess a lot of content management systems just render really bad markup. However, if we provide the correct markup in our prototypes, the chances are much higher that the end product will be accessible too. And just a short remark, all those demos are on GitHub, and there are additional links and resources there for every recommendation we make. Okay, now screen readers not only exist on desktop browsers. Werner, how do you browse the web when you're on the road?
Okay. The iPhone and the iPad are really fantastic devices. And about 5 years ago, nobody could have imagined that a blind user would be able to use a touchscreen device. But with the introduction of the iPhone 3GS, Apple also introduced VoiceOver on the iPhone. So in order to use VoiceOver on the iPhone, you have to enable it, and I quickly tell where you can do this. You go to the settings, accessibility, and there you find VoiceOver, and there you can enable VoiceOver. And VoiceOver also has some more configuration options. One of those is the rotor that I will describe in a few moments.
Sorry, we just lost connection to the iPad.
Okay.
App switcher, mail, VoiceOver off.
And you can, in the accessibility settings, you can also enable triple-click home button. And with the triple-click home button, you don't need to always go to the settings to enable VoiceOver, so you can just click the home button 3 times in a row, and it will enable or disable VoiceOver. This feature is really great when you just want to test something, and afterwards you would like your normal gestures. Perhaps I should mention, when you change, when you turn on VoiceOver, then the gestures will change. So you can't use your normal gestures anymore, and that is really important to know.
Okay, it's working again.
Okay. Is it turned on? Or
No, not yet.
Landscape,
okay.
home button to the left.
Okay.
Build on folder, 13 apps. Mail, 2 new items. Safari,
I
Safari,
start Safari.
demo 1.1, heading level 1, landmark start.
Okay. Now I can use the rotor.
Links, language, volume, vertical navigation, tables, 0 tables.
And you heard 0 tables. VoiceOver wasn't able to detect a table on this page. So I can, of course, navigate through
Check-in. Coffee and welcome.
this table by flicking left or right.
10. 11. The creativity. R. Evolution. Future of front-end frameworks.
Or I can change with the rotor to
Links. Language. Volume. Vertical navigation.
vertical navigation.
Coping with the broken web. Building the web in
And
2018.
now I move up or down.
Coping with the broken web. Building the web in 2000. Gearing up for Google Glass develop. Front-end performance. Where it matters.
However, this table is really, the user doesn't recognize that's a table. VoiceOver doesn't recognize and the user doesn't know that there is a table. So if the table is very large, it might be really a problem.
Tables. Links. Forward to demo 1.2. Accessible table. Link. Forward to demo 1.2. Web page loaded. Demo
Now-
1.2. Heading level 1. Time. Design track.
This is the second table.
Tech track.
Again, I move
8. 30.
horizontally.
10. Design track. Time. 10. Design track. The creativity. Vertical navigation. 11.
or vertically.
12. 12.
But
13.
the most
14.
important-
Responsive web design. Clever tips and techniques.
The important thing is that with changing to tables in the rotor, I can really detect that there is a table. So I know there is a table and VoiceOver puts the focus right on the table. And then I know I'm in the table and I can navigate it. And the other way around is, it's really a problem.
Okay, so just quick overview again, how to activate VoiceOver on the iPhone or on the iPad, and how to activate Quick Toggle, which is also great when you're sitting on your iPhone, like on the train, and it suddenly starts speaking with you, and it's not Siri. Now, the most important guidelines to use when thinking about making a website accessible is the Wcag, which is short for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And like HTML and CSS, that's a W3C recommendation. And its goal is to make the web more accessible to a wider range of people with disabilities. And the very nice side effect is that usually by making a website accessible, you make it more usable to users in general. And we will see why this is quite obvious. So the Wcag is based on 4 guiding principles. If you take the first letters, it's POR abbreviated. So the first one is a website has to be perceivable. So as an example, an image without an alternative text is not perceivable by a blind person. You have no idea what information is conveyed by this image. A website has to be operable. So as an example, a person who can't use a mouse relies on the keyboard to navigate through a website. So if your website doesn't work with the keyboard only, it's not operable. Sorry. Next point is understandable. A form element without a label is not understandable, as we will see soon. And the last one, it has to be robust. So as an example, if your markup is invalid, it's pretty likely that it will break sometime if a screen reader updates or something. Now, every principle has guidelines attached to it. There are 12 in total. And each of those guidelines has testable success criteria. And those criteria can be divided into different conformance levels. So A would be the lowest, AAA the highest. Websites of the federal government in Switzerland have to comply to AA. And most important for us, every success criterion has techniques which describe how to comply with this criterion. And they can be either sufficient, so they can be enough to comply with, or they can be advisory, so it makes sense to use them, but it's not enough. For example, if browser support is not yet there. This would be an example. So if we start at the top, there's the principle 3, understandable. And this principle has a guideline, which is called input assistance. This guideline has a success criterion, among others, which is called labels or instructions. And it's conformance level A, so the most basic one. And there are sufficient techniques for this criterion. And one of them is providing descriptive labels and, as an example, indicating required fields. And we will see what this means.
Front-end conference Zurich HTML content has keyboard. How to make your front-end accessible. Front-end conference Zurich HTML content.
Okay. This is the first form example. And usually you navigate through the form with the tab key, in this case with Option tab.
Entering banner interact with how to make edit text blank.
And now if you listen carefully,
edit text blank. Edit text blank.
VoiceOver announces edit text blank. This means you are on a field and you can enter text. But what text? You have no idea on which field you are and whether the field is required or not. So let's move on.
Submit button.
I submit the form.
Press submit button.
Nothing happens. So I can just tap back.
Edit text blank. Edit text blank. Edit text blank.
And I have no idea whether there was an error or not.
Edit text submit button.
So in order to detect what the problem is, I will have to move the focus back.
Leaving banner entering main. Edit text blank. Submit button. Edit error field must not be empty.
And then I can hear it. Error field must not be empty. And that's clearly not the way it should be. So let's look at the next example.
Submit button. Visited link. Forward to demo 2.2. How to make your front end accessible. Front end conference Zurich HTML content. Entering banner interact with how to name required edit text.
So you hear name required edit text. So the user knows this is a required field, and he also knows what he should enter.
Email required edit text. Telephone edit text. Submit button.
I press submit.
Name required error. Field must not be empty.
And
edit
I get
text.
the error message immediately. And that's really how a form should be made accessible.
So if we quickly have a look at the code again.
How to make your developer tools. VoiceOver off.
The first issue, which is pretty obvious, this text required fields are bold, is completely useless to non-sighted users. There are no labels used, but instead just a strong tag. And there is an example which relies on a placeholder attribute, so that's, well, probably not common for a form like this, but it's very common for search forms or something. Again, placeholder attribute, like a missing label, is not enough, at least for VoiceOver right now. So support for this will come, but it's not there yet. If we have a look at the form validation, you can see that spans were inserted, which is, again, fine for sighted users, but there is no way of connecting such an element to the input field, like this. So the screen reader has no idea that there is an error message. Now, the correct example would be to use a label tag, obviously. And here we added the required text to the label, so it's obvious. You might use a star there, that's something which is pretty common. However, there are screen readers which don't read a star. So to use required as a text might be the best solution. And in this field where we used a placeholder, we inserted a hidden label, but it's important to note that using display none or visibility hidden to hide such an element will also hide it from the screen reader. So either use clipping, like here, move it out of the viewport with absolute positioning, or have a combination of those. Just have a label and don't hide it from screen readers. Now when validating the form, now we insert the error message into the label. So that might be an issue visually. So it might be a little bit more complicated to move this where you want to have it visually. So for example, beneath the field, we will see another example where we're using area as an alternative to these methods where you don't have to insert the error message into the label. And one detail, so again, if you submit the form, the first field, which is invalid, is automatically focused. So the screen reader realizes where something's wrong.
VoiceOver on Chrome. How to make your front-end accessible.
Okay, now
Front-end
to the next
conference
demo.
Zurich HTML content.
Now the next demo is also a form.
Entering banner interact with how to make
that uses ARIA.
name required edit text.
And also VoiceOver announces that name is a required field.
Email required edit text. Telephone edit text. Submit button.
And when I press submit,
Name required invalid data edit text.
I get the error message
Error
that
field must not be empty.
the field must not be empty. And this is clearly also a way to make a form accessible.
So
VoiceOver off.
if I show you the code, you can see, well, let's have a look without validation. First of all, there's a new attribute called area required. So area stands for accessible rich internet applications and deals with interactive stuff like inline validation as an example. So by adding this attribute, you can tell the assistive technology that this field is required. And as you remember, it was read twice that it's required because we added it to the label, and VoiceOver is already able to understand this new attribute. But since older screen readers or screen readers using older browsers like i6 in combination with JAWS, I don't know, it's a problem that browser support for ARIA is just not good enough. So this would be something you could use as progressive enhancement. It's not enough to rely on this. And the solution for the error message was using area described by, which receives an ID, and this ID is pointing to the error message. And in addition, the screen reader was saying something about invalid data, and that's due to the area invalid attribute. So VoiceOver support for this solution is fine, but other screen readers wouldn't work like this yet.
VoiceOver on how to make your front-end accessible. Front-end conference Zurich HTML content.
So the next example is an example with a demo with HTML5.
Entering banner interact with name required edit text.
VoiceOver announces the field label and announces that it is required.
Email required edit text. Telephone, edit text, submit button.
Now when I press submit,
Press submit button. Name required. Required edit text. Chrome has new window.
VoiceOver just says Chrome has new window, but I'm not able to enter this window or read the text in this window. And this is obviously a problem of VoiceOver. Probably HTML5 is not yet supported. So this can still be a problem if you use HTML5.
So I'm pretty sure this is going to be the best solution in the future, since the browser is going to handle form validation and you don't have to write any JavaScript or something. But right now, as an example, VoiceOver just isn't able to use it yet. Okay.
Keyboard brightness. VoiceOver off.
So to sum this up, use the correct markup, again, as with tables. Use label elements. In addition, indicate if a field is required by adding this as a text into the label, so it's obvious for every assistive device. You can use the HTML5 required attribute and the area required attribute in addition, so in terms of progressive enhancement. And if you use inline validation for the form, tell the user that the input is invalid by connecting an error message to the field. So best solution, insert it into the label and focus the first invalid field so you know where to correct something. And as I said, in future, you might rely on area invalid and, for example, area described by to connect the error message, but not yet. So this is not yet a sufficient technique for Wcag conformance. We have some additional links on GitHub for this demo, where you can have a look at alternative solutions with other area approaches. Another important subject when talking about web accessibility is keyboard accessibility. We probably don't have enough, we have enough time for the demos. We are faster than when we rehearsed. Okay, so here we have a text with some links. And now I'm not able to use a mouse. I want to navigate using the keyboard. As you can see in the status bar, we focused some link, but we have no idea which one. So by removing the focus outline or removing any visible indication that something is focused, we completely removed keyboard accessibility. Now the correct example would be something like this. Best solution, use the native outline, which looks different from browser to browser. And in addition, you can apply the hover styles to the focus pseudo-class or pseudo-selector, so you have additional visual clues that something is focused. And another anti-pattern you see very often, especially with some Google products, is using, I call them fake buttons. So first of all, we can't focus the first button. The second is focusable, but we can't interact with it if we press Enter or space. And having a look at the codes, they're both just spans or diffs or whatever. The second one uses the tab index attribute, so at least it's focusable, but you can't interact with it right now. So in case you absolutely have to use a fake button, first of all, add a tab index attribute, so it it's part of the tab order, and use 0, so it's just the default value, and you don't mess up other tab behavior. An additional attribute is this area role. Well, you might know it from other elements, for example, role banner for header elements. There's a role for buttons. So screen readers or assistive devices which understand this role almost treat this as a real button. But the most important part here is to have a keyboard listener which is listening to the space and the enter key, so you're able to interact with this button. But the obvious solution is to just use a button. It works out of the box. Okay, so to sum it up, do not remove focus indication. And if you do, add another obvious indication that something is focused. And use natively accessible elements. It can be a link. For example, if you want to jump somewhere inside the page, this button-like element might be a link. Otherwise, it's just a button. If you have to use something else, add this area attribute and add it to the tab order in addition to having this keyboard key down listeners. Now, to sum everything up, we as front-end engineers really can make a difference when it comes down to web accessibility. And because we didn't have enough time to focus on everything which is important, we provided a few important links. They're also on the GitHub repository. So Werner, you might have some remarks.
Yes. There are really lots of resources out there on the web regarding accessibility. Some focus on screen reader accessibility, some on low vision, others on still other accessibilities. So we really try to pick resources that might be useful to you as front-end developers. And if you are developing here in Switzerland, I should really highly recommend Access for All, especially if you would like to test and certify your web page or your web application. They are really the place to go. So I hope this is useful for you. And if you have other resources that might be useful, every suggestion is welcome.
And if you care about interactive elements, Area is the place to go. So like Wcag, it's a W3C recommendation, although not as far in the process as Wcag is. So it's still a candidate recommendation. And it provides a lot of approaches to make things like tabs or dialogues, mega menus and stuff accessible. And here you have some links, again, also on GitHub, for some approaches to those really difficult elements to make accessible. And that's it. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, no question. What about HTML mail? How is there anything we can do the mail accessible? Or, I mean, the only way to lay out mail is with table that all the mail clients can read it and is on any place the same. But can we make that accessible too, somehow?
Well, if the screen reader supports it, then it should not be a problem. The problem is with HTML5 that still some screen readers don't support it, or not all, or some less than others, and that's, I think, this is the main problem.
And tables are not generally an accessibility issues. So yeah, if you want to present data tables and you don't mark it up correctly, it is an issue. But if you misuse it for layout purposes, then it's not generally an issue, I guess, depending on the technology. Yeah. But you weren't able to print out your conference tickets because they were provided with an HTML email, and I think VoiceOver with Mail on OS X was not able to find this link to print out the PDF. So yeah, it is an issue.
Thank you. There's a very easy way for HTML mails use alternative text. Put the text in there. Thank you for the talk, great talk, very impressive. One thing to remind you all, Google is blind too, so keep on focus on keeping everything accessible. It will come back to you. The other question I have is HTML5, no section and article tags, which should put more semantics into HTML. What's the current standing there? Is it already supported, or is it are the screen readers behind there?
I think VoiceOver doesn't support it yet, but I'm not quite sure. There is somewhere a web page that lists the HTML5 support for each screen reader. Possibly we should also add this URL to our list. I have it somewhere stored, and I will send it to Thomas.
VoiceOver on Chrome, haptic muting.
So if you remember, when navigating those demo sites with VoiceOver,
Select next tab. Select next tab.
yeah, probably you should do it, Werner. It's stuck.
Do stuff button. Do
Can you go
stuff
to the head?
button.
To the head.
To the title.
Okay.
Do stuff to button. Entering main. Do stuff button. Control option lock on. Heading level 1 2 items. Demo 4.2 partly
And now
accessible
if you go
buttons.
to the next element,
Downwards or upwards?
downwards.
Last heading level 1 2 items. Almost accessible fake button.
Okay, it doesn't work anymore. But you might remember something like leaving banner area. So we are using the header element with a role banner tag, and VoiceOver realized that it's leaving this area. So with some roles, it already works. And there are, well, it can be really annoying if you're browsing a website, for example, a comment thread where every comment is marked up as an article and every reply is marked up as an article as well. And the screen reader is always like reminding you that you're entering something, leaving something. So it can be an issue too. But yeah, we will put some resources on GitHub so you have further reading. There's a lot of testing going on for HTML5 support with screen readers.
Yeah. Oops. Thank you for this talk. I have a question regarding your workflow. So we have this very wonderful inspector Firebug. How do you inspect a website? Is inspector accessible, or do you use other tools? For example, for a web page on this one, which is hardly accessible, to at least know why it's broken.
Werner?
I simply use the screen reader. the web tools are mostly not accessible. So Firefox is only recently accessible, and I really haven't had time yet to try out all these plugins that are for web testing and so on. But usually I just work with the screen reader, and sometimes we do walkthroughs. That means somebody sits beside me and we walk through a website, and sometimes it's really impossible for me to detect certain errors. I just can detect or feel that something is somehow wrong or weird in some way, and only if a sighted person tells me, oh, that's, for example, that's a table or that's whatever, I get an idea what the problem might be. So it's really not always easy to test web applications or websites only with a screen reader. Sometimes you might find errors, and sometimes not.
And even worse, the screen reader itself might be buggy. So we discovered some issues with VoiceOver when you want to use the context menu on links. For some links it works, for some it doesn't. There's a famous bug with VoiceOver where a table with an empty first header cell is completely messed up. VoiceOver isn't able to determine which cells belong to which headers. So yeah, I guess sometimes you have no idea whether the screen reader is the problem, the markup is the problem, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I wanted to ask if the abbreviation tag works, because I know you mentioned that with forms, you should put the words required in every label, and as a designer, maybe I don't want that, but could I use the abbreviation tag to have a star, but then say, you know, the long version is required? I wonder if you maybe ever tried that and if it works.
That's also something that WCAG recommends as one example. So that's one approach, yeah. Okay, thanks a lot, and make your next website not only fast and beautiful, but also accessible.